Hello, class. Welcome to the next segment in the Week 5 material. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about something called a string, which is kind of similar to lists in some respects, but there's also a few differences, especially how each one is formatted. That's one of the main differences between strings and lists is how each respective item is formatted. But from sort of a more general overview, we can go ahead and take a look at an example string that we have defined here on line 2. So again, just like any other variable, you have variable on the left-hand side, equal sign, and then what you want to go in that variable is on the right-hand side here. And this would be sort of an example of how you could put a string inside of a variable here. So the way that you make a variable a string, which maybe in more layman's terms, a string can also be thought of as sort of a textual item, an item that has just regular text, words, whatever that might be. And a string is basically going to be treated as sort of a sequence of characters, or uh, more basically, it's going to be treated as basically an item that's a word, as opposed to being treated as a numerical value, which is most of what we've been dealing with before now. And the way that you declare a string is you have the quotation marks involved. So it doesn't matter in Python, it doesn't matter whether you use the double quotes or the single quotes as long as you're consistent about it. So if you open with double quotes, you have to close with double quotes. If you open with a single quote, then you have to close with a single quote as well. Doesn't matter which one you use as long as you're consistent about it. And then everything that appears in between the quotes is considered to be part of the string itself. So in this case, we have a string, again, a textual item that is just going to be read as boomer space sooner exclamation mark here. And sometimes you'll also hear a string being referred to as a sequence of characters or a collection of characters. And basically what that means is you have a list of characters of sorts. And by character, I mean some sort of symbol that you can get to appear on the screen. So this capital B is a character, this space here is a character, this exclamation mark is a character, this lowercase n is also a character. So a string is more technically known as a sequence of characters or a collection of characters. And as we'll demonstrate very shortly, we can actually pull individual characters out of a string. But usually what you're going to be doing with the string is just printing out the entire string itself, which is what we're doing on line 4 here. So here we have a variable called myString, which we've set equal to boomer sooner. And here on line 4, we're going to print out what the value of myString is, which should just be boomer sooner. And you'll see that in doing that, we actually do get boomer sooner appearing in the console here. So here we print out what the value of myString is. MyString is a string, and that's equal to this on the right-hand side here, including the quotation marks. Well, mostly including what's in between the quotation marks. The quotation marks are how the computer knows that this is in fact a string. So kind of like how the square brackets are used to tell a computer it's about to be given a list of numbers or something is a list of numbers, the quotes tell the computer that this is in fact a string or a textual item. And if we want to, we can actually pull individual characters out of the string. And this works much the same way as a list does. But in the case of a Python list, each individual entry is separated by commas. In the case of a string, each individual character is sort of treated separately. So if I do myString 0 in the bracket, again, keeping in mind the computer starts counting at 0. So what we would call the first character in the string, the computer is going to refer to as the 0th character or character number 0 in the string. So if we want to pull that specific character out, we can just simply put a 0 in the brackets here. So again, just like with a list, we specify the string that we want to pull that information out of, put a 0 in that bracket to pull out the very first entry in myString, which is in fact just this capital B here. And we do in fact get that result appearing in the console. And if we want to, we can also put a negative number in there. So just like with lists, where you have the name of the list, a bracket, and then a negative number in the brackets here, you can also put a negative number in the brackets when you're pulling information out of a string. So in this case, this is going to work very much the same way as a regular list. So a list, when you put a negative number in the brackets, if you put -1 in the brackets, you want the last entry in the list. Similar idea on line 6 here, where you have myString bracket -1. That means I want the last character in the string, which is in fact going to be this exclamation mark that appears at the very end here. and we can in fact confirm that result. And if I wanted the second to last character, then I could just simply make this -2, and that would give me this lowercase r here. And just to take that point a little bit further, if we take the string in question and put a 6 in the brackets, that means we want character number 6. Excuse me, counting from left to right here, we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would give us a blank space. And if we want to, we can confirm that result. Doesn't look like anything printed out, but there is in fact a blank space, and I'll go and highlight it just to prove that it is in fact there. And also, there's nothing special about this variable called myString, so I could also call this x as long as I'm consistent about it. So I could say x is equal to boomer sooner, but I can reproduce the same exact thing using the variable x instead of the variable called myString. So nothing special about this variable that I've chosen. Sorry about that. Nothing special about this variable that I've chosen to use here on line 2. Just make sure that whatever variable you do choose to be on the left-hand side of the equal sign, just make sure you are consistent about it. So that's a look at strings. And there's another sort of topic related to strings that comes up a lot in the realm of computer science called concatenation. And it turns out you can use this on strings and lists, although it's probably going to be most useful on a string as opposed to being useful on a list. So you get more use using this on a string than a list. So that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on. So here on lines 12 and 13, I have two strings defined. One is equal to boomer, again including the space here. The other is equal to sooner with the exclamation mark at the end there. And on line 15, we have another variable which we're calling result, and we're setting that equal to boomer string plus sooner string. So this plus sign that you see here, that is the same plus sign that you would use to add two numbers together. And now you might be wondering, how is the computer going to actually add two textual items together? It doesn't really add them together in a mathematical sense. It simply just takes this result here and joins the two strings together in the order that they appear. So here we have boomer string to the left-hand side of the plus sign. So it's going to take boomer string, which is defined up here, which is equal to that boomer, including the space at the end, is going to take that character sequence, plug it in here, and then join it with this character sequence, again defined here. It's going to join this, which appears here, with this, which appears here, and it's going to join those two strings together in the order that they appear. So it's going to start with boomer, then boomer space, and then it's going to join that to sooner exclamation mark in that order. Or I should say, probably a better way to put that is sooner exclamation mark will be joined to boomer space. But if we want to see what that actually looks like, that goes in this variable called result, and then here on line 16 we'll print out what in fact is in result. And you can see we get boomer first, which corresponds to this, and then we get sooner appearing after that, which corresponds to this on the other side of the plus sign. So unlike traditional mathematical addition, order is actually very important when you have two strings involved. And if we want to, we could also, well actually I should keep that there. I'll just simply disable the print statement. Another thing that we can do is we can multiply a string by a numerical value. And again, this might seem kind of strange, but what the computer actually does here is it takes the string in question, which is defined as result, which we've established to be equal to this based on the output to the console. It's going to take this string called result and then evaluate that *3. So again, same asterisk that would be used to multiply any two numerical values together. Instead of multiplying the string by 3, which sounds kind of silly, and the reason why it sounds silly is because it is silly, it's not going to multiply the string by 3. It's actually going to take the string and concatenate that string to itself 3 times. So it's going to basically do, so actually I can just go ahead and demonstrate what happens here. So this end result of what's on the right hand side here will go in this variable called chant, and we'll print out what chant actually is. And if we run that, we'll get this result, which was the same thing as just doing that. So this takes result and concatenates result to itself 3 times. So I get the same exact output. And if I really want to have fun with this, then I can go back to what we started with the result times 3, and then I could do something like this and print out the result of that chant. And yeah, that's not. I'm sure if you sent this program to some Longhorn fans, they would not be very pleased about that. But as it is right now, but that's the whole idea behind this multiplication here. Is it's not traditional mathematical multiplication. You're actually taking a string and concatenating it to itself, however many number of times you have here. So you can't take a string and multiply it by another string. If you were to attempt this, then you would get this error message, can't multiply sequence by non-int of type string. And you also can't take a string and multiply it by something that's not an integer. So a couple error messages that read pretty similarly, but the main thing is if you're going to multiply a string by something, it's got to be an integer involved somewhere. So as a look at the multiplication side of things. And we can also take this a step further if we really want to. So if this idea of concatenation also obeys the rules of parentheses. So whatever is in the innermost set of parentheses will be evaluated first. So it's here it's going to take result, which to refresh your memory on what that looks like. We can go ahead and run that. So that's what's being stored in this variable called result up here. If we take that string, add a space to it, so that's going to concatenate these two things together, and that means just join them together in the order that they appear. So you get boomer sooner exclamation mark plus a space, that entire thing multiplied by 3. And here I'll just go ahead and demonstrate what that does. You can see I do in fact get a space in here now, and there's actually a space at the very end here, but not very consequential because we can't really see it. But this is just to sort of illustrate how you can use parentheses here to get the computer to concatenate things in a specific order if order is something that's very important. Probably not something that you'll have to overly concern yourself with, but in case you're doing something that might require concatenation to be done in a specific order, this is one way you can do that. You can use parentheses to make sure the computer is doing things in the order that you want it to do.